Subscribe, like, comment and share to support the channel. Thank you for the support. The scene changes back to Aldean Fortress as a voice wonders why Giorno's reconnaissance group 6 hasn't returned yet. It was revealed to be Michael, the commanding officer. Thor appears by his side and informs him that based on the words of the other reconnaissance groups, the monsters did not show any special traits and that it was true that Giorno's group 6 had not returned yet. Michael grew concerned over that news as he noted that it was strange for Giorno out of everyone to not return. As he continues to look at the map on the table, he soon asks Thor about how the preparations for the defense of the Day of the Twin Moons was going. Thor informs him that they were about 85% complete and that if they were to fight right now there wouldn't be a big issue. Michael then asks him if there was a possibility of the Day of the Twin Moons being moved forward. Thor reveals to him that he was bothered by the fact that Reconnaissance Group 6 not having returned right now, as it was something that had never happened before. Michael thought about it and concluded that since Group 6 had not returned yet, it must mean that there was a different reason than what they've normally prepared for. Michael wore a grim expression on his face as he tells Thor that he had a bad feeling about this. We return to our boy who was about to face off against a stitched-up predator who was currently looking absolutely demonic right now. Even Damien was afraid by what he was seeing as he realized something. 2 players had been grabbed by the monster and one of them called out to the player called Lucky Day to save them, but it was no use as the monster pulled them closer to its mouth and began eating them in front of Damien and the others. The thought of a monster that swallows users whole was shocking Damien as he simply stood by and watched it happen, but Giorno places his hand in front of them, telling all the players that were behind him to leave this to him while they returned to the Aldean Fortress. He wanted them to let Vice Commander Peterson know to prepare to fight like the Day of the Twin Moons immediately, but Damien knew in his mind that even Captain Giorno wouldn't be able to face those kinds of monsters alone. To top it off, the enemies that surrounded them were flanking them, which made escaping difficult. Damien then informs Giorno that even if they were to leave everything to him, he wasn't sure that everyone will be able to return back safely. He then suggested to Giorno that they should all try to fight them together. But the man who summoned the ugly monster stood in their way as well as the monster appeared right behind him. He questions them about whether they still haven't grasped the situation yet and wonders if they still think that they were in a situation where they could run away. He introduces the red orb in his hand as the destruction orb and that he had brought it here to catch Damien with. He raises the destruction orb into the air and asks Damien to see if he could beat the nasty monster behind him. "Are you an idiot?" said Damien to the man who held the orb, which stuns him for a moment. Damien tells him that although he didn't know where he got such a cheat key item from, but it was obvious to him that it was an experimental weapon used with his lifeline. He then questions the enemies that surrounded him on whether they even know who the guys who gave that to them were, such as their names, affiliations, or goals. Knowing this made Damien mock them as they didn't even know why they gave them the item and yet they were running around all excited. He reminds them that the basis of magic is equivalent exchange and continues to question them if it makes sense for them to use such power with no risk. Hearing him repeatedly dissing them made the enemies that surrounded Damien pissed off. Seeing their reactions to his provocation made Damien smile as it was all a part of his plan. He wanted them to lose their cool first so that way they would move more predictably. His plan worked as even their leader started to get angry over Damien's insults as he spoke out that it doesn't matter. He tells Damien that no matter what kind of object the orb was or what risk there is to it, I-Mangchen can handle it. He warns Damien that he was going to take out his tongue first and cut it to pieces. Hearing that threat was nothing to Damien as he showed no reaction to it, only thinking that the enemies were easy to mess with. The ugly monster soon started its attacks on Damien. It uses its unique stitched predator skill called Collapse to attack the players, but everyone manages to dodge away from its attack. The ugly monster then switches it up to use the skill called Thorn of Death. Damien was alarmed to see that there were tentacles coming up from the ground, but Giorno was prepared as he casted his own Night Crow skill that lighted up his sword, using the skill called the Sun, Moon, and Stars. He easily cuts the tentacles that appeared from the ground. Damien watches him and was impressed by Captain Giorno, as his nickname was the Monster Slaughterer. Seeing him able to handle the monster was perfect for Damien as he decided to leave the monster to Giorno while he analyzes its attack pattern. But a sudden attack misses his head by a few inches. He turns to see where it came from and sees that the other guys that held the orbs were the ones that were responsible. He couldn't believe that these weak guys were sure excited because there were so many of time, but he knew in his head that being gathered together like that would just make them a target. As the other players tried their best to deflect the attacks, Bundles shouts out to Damien to look at a certain direction. The ugly monster had unleashed another stitched predator skill called Rotten Meat Shower that sent out numerous projectiles all around it, which shocks Giorno as well. Damien couldn't believe that it was capable of doing a wide-range attack too, so he knew that it was the end for him in analyzing of patterns. He rushes forward with his daggers while telling Hyun to watch his back while everyone needed to spread apart for now. The enemies above laughed at what was going on as Hyun was shocked to see that Damien was moving on his own. The two losers giggled among themselves and teased Hyun about how her pimp had left her and ran away. Hearing those words from the losers angered her as she called them damn bastards. The losers continued to laugh amongst themselves as Hyun wore a dark expression on her face. She then instantly leaps above the air from where they stood while being covered in her pink petals. One of the losers wore a mean-faced expression as he knows what's coming next. She scolds them by telling the losers that if they wanted to screw around with those mouths of theirs, she was going to help them with it. Using her skill called Chevalier, Hyun slices off the necks of one of the losers that had made fun of her. Her attack causes a huge pink explosion to occur. The other loser aimed his weapon at her in anger over his friend being killed, but Hyun uses another one of her skill called Balestra Rose to cut off his head as well in a single swing of her rapier. She then turns back to look at Damien and wondered if he actually had a plan in mind. She tells him that she would kill him if he fails as she watches him from above the cliffs. Damien could see that Hyun was able to succeed in disrupting those bastards on the cliff as they were nothing when you fight them one-on-one. Soon enough everyone on Damien's team soon stared at a notification window that appeared in front of them. Seeing that the other players have recovered somewhat and that the stitched predators patterns weren't increasing anymore, Damien decides that this was the moment that they should go for the win. He had summoned a different weapon this time. It was the Kurenai dagger that was rank rare. Damien then began to speak out loud to his teammates, asking them if they could hear him and if any one of them had caught a champion monster before. Seeing that no one responded to his question, Damien noted that he was the only one with experience in handling a champion mob raid and then proceeds to inform them that he was the one to take the lead. Damien then informs them that this was the moment he started the battle against Mingchen. Damien started the battle off by casting his Witch Doctor skill. He easily slices the back and a few pieces off the ugly monster by casting Bloody Impulse 99 times. Hyun and Giorno were both impressed by Damien's feat as Giorno commented that they had no choice but to trust Damien. He then went straight to Mingchen and gave him a massive kick towards his stomach. He then quickly turns around once more. Seeing the ugly monster up close, Damien knew that the more they attack it, the more it changes crudely and noted that the monster was not normal. He could also see that the orbs the Jingsan startup bastards are holding show that only one group would do something like this. The mastermind behind this must be the Crucifix's Dawn. Damien then advises all his teammates to keep attacking the champion monster, adding on that the more the champion monster uses its abilities, the harder it gets for the Jingsan bastards to control it, so they have to make it keep focusing on them. He then orders Hyun to help Captain Giorno and keep attacking. Damien knew that what was important right now was for him to return to his teammates and then find the mastermind afterwards. Captain Giorno went to work as he started by cutting at the champion's monster legs. Hyun supported him by leaping into the air to cast her own abilities. Damien then orders Bundle to shoot the monster as well. Bundle hears the command and waves a red flag. A bunch of his siblings appear and took cover behind the pieces of the champion monster that had been cut off. They soon chirped and fired from their blow darts. The champion monster began to lose control and started to attack the very same people who had summoned it. A player from the Jingsan side had been taken and eaten by the champion monster as a notification appeared to inform their leader that they had logged out. Mingchen slowly recovered from Damien's kick as the champion monster continued to eat his people. He looks in horror and anger as he tried to make sense of what was going on right now. He could see that Damien was attacking the champion monster. Damien wore a smile on his face as he continued his attacks. Knowing that the Jingsan people had finally lost control of the champion monster that they had summoned, he then decides to change his plan by ordering Hyun to lead the monster to the cliff since they couldn't control it anymore. The monster will only focus on them right now. He then questions Dandyman and I Love Choco on whether they had prepared the trap he wanted. They both nodded in agreement as Damien wanted them to finish this off in one go. Captain Giorno, Damien and Hyun run beside each other as the champion monster chased after them. Damien informs the two of them that he was going to be the one to lure it to the very end, so he needed both of them to go up the cliff and in front of the trap. Hyun and Captain Giorno understood his commands and started to part ways from Damien. Looking back at the champion monster chasing after him, Damien started a countdown to when the trap would activate it, but something happens to him. An arrow had pierced through his body as he ran. Mingchen shouted in joy over having caught Damien as he was the one that shot the arrow. Continuing to aim his crossbow at Damien, Ming-chen laughs and asks him if he thought he was going to escape. Damien had fallen to the ground due to the surprise attack which caused the champion monster to catch up to him. Both Captain Giorno and Hyun turned around and called out to Damien with concern over what had just happened, but it was too late as Damien had been caught by the champion monster. Damien could only think that at least he had lured it to the cliff where the trap was. Wasting no time anymore, Damien turns and orders his team to not worry about him and to execute the plan right now, seeing that they had no choice in the matter. I Love Choco and Dandyman started to cast their abilities to turn on the trap. Her magic started to move around the cliff that was above where the champion monster stood. The assassin member then casted his own skill called the Stalker, unleashes multiple waves of attacks onto the cliff that she had wrapped her magic around. The cliff then broke into multiple pieces that formed sharp rocks. The rocks soon fell over to where Damien and the champion monster stood. The group then went over to where Damien was to see if he had made it out. Captain Giorno was the first one to head back. He informs the group that they couldn't wait for Damien as more monsters will come soon, so they needed to return using another route. The group agrees with his decision and started to make their way back, but Hyun took a moment to look back once again, seeing the ruins of the cliff all around. She knew that Damien was definitely still alive. A shadow soon emerges from the debris of the trap that Damien had planned. Ming-chen managed to survive, but was furious over why his teammates weren't responding to him. But another dark shadow soon stood in front of him. He recognizes who it was and wonders why he wouldn't die as he started to use the destruction orb once again. He started to go crazy while repeating the words "die" over and over again as the destruction orb started to summon even more monsters that appeared on the cliffs around him. Monkeys with the skull masks appeared called boomers. They were a monster that appears in the extreme lands of Veritas Highlands. They are quite vicious and will eat humans and monsters alike. A red notification window appears and informs the user that the Tessa ring sends strong evil energy. Ming-chen soon stopped talking as something happened to him. Damien had appeared once again in his zombified mode. Look at our boy. Damien had pierced through Ming-chen's body with just the use of his hand. He tells him that the reason why he wouldn't die was an industry secret, but informs him that just because he couldn't die doesn't mean that it didn't hurt. Damien looks up to the various boomers that surrounded him. Knowing that the zombification was about to end, he needed a way to sweep up that many monsters. He then decides to show off his skills for the first time in a while, casting a bright blue spell onto the ground. Damien shouts out "come out." Multiple blue summoning circles appeared around him as Damien casted the witch doctor skill called Corpse Creed. Something started to come out from those very same summoning circles. Damien's eyes were lighted up as he questions whether Ming-chen was the only one that could call monsters. It turns out that Damien manages to summon his own monsters so that they could fight on equal grounds. Thanks for watching the latest part from the voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more.